Okay, as promised, here is the mini addendum, appendix, Coda, whatever you want to call it, to the Undead series of my video blog. Two quick things that I wanted to mention that I didn't have time for in the other ones. One, I want to talk a little bit about turning. Now, back in episode 17, and I'll put a link somewhere over here, about that, I did talk about turning undead in general, and most of those ideas still hold true. And just a quick recap, I do use certain house rules usually when I'm talking about turning undead. And one of them is the idea that it only lasts as long as the cleric is going to continue to present the holy symbol. There has to be a line of sight. The weaker undead are turned first if you're dealing with a group of undead. You can't keep trying to return the same undead over and over and over again. If you fail at undead turning, or you don't manage to turn all of them in a go, then the remaining ones are not going to get turned, until, the next day or the next some other encounter. Otherwise, I don't really have big problems with the turning undead mechanic. Some people use it, or it's a spell instead of an innate ability, and I think that's kind of cool. I certainly wouldn't do it in a system like in Molded Basic where clerics don't get spells at first level. I mean, because otherwise they're really, really severely weakened. So, kind of pick one or the other. The second thing I wanted to talk a little about was undead in other genres besides D&D type fantasy. Now, you can talk about dark fantasy and things kind of like Warhammer and that sort of thing, and the role of the undead there. And I think that's more of a difference of flavor than really a difference in genre, because it's still a fantasy game. You're still dealing with things where you have wizards and you have elves and you have, and things like goblins and skeletons and stuff like that still exist. So I don't really think that's that different than playing it in D&D. There's some differences, but it's not big. Using the undead in other genres, and specifically I'm thinking of things like historical modern and also things like science fiction or supers, is really interesting to me. I'm not a big expert on those genres of games. I don't play a lot of science fiction games. I don't play a lot of modern era. I don't play a lot of supers. But just thinking about the genre, it's interesting to me because, well, obviously you have things like Zombie Apocalypse, which we've talked about. And you also have things like the Call of Cthulhu and the horror gaming, which often takes place in modern era or, recent history, 1920s or Gaslight or things like that. And I think that can be cool. But those, again, are just variations on a theme. You're still talking about a situation where, whether it's the Wild West or Victorian London or current era suburban America or anything, where you're basically taking a real era in time and a real time and place, and you're putting something supernatural into it. That's, to me, is more about the type of game you're running than the undead or not the undead. I mean, it's a question of, is it a horror game where monsters are truly monstrous and characters are not necessarily these fantastic heroes who can easily cope with that sort of a challenge. And this is getting back into things like slasher flicks and stuff like that, where you have the teenagers or whatever at the camp, and the crazed demonic killer or whatever is picking them off, and they're trying to defend themselves with chainsaws or whatever. I don't know. I'm not a big horror guy. Anyway, but you get my point. Now, science fiction. This is interesting to me because, I know you have the Necrons in Warhammer 40k, but never mind that. The idea that you would have, space zombies or whatever, I'm not sure how you'd run that. Because is it like a zombie virus? Is it something where they're animated because of some scientific reason? Or is it actually necromancy and magic? I think that's kind of an interesting idea. I think Mutant Future, Gamma World and stuff does a little bit with that. But you're getting into that thing where you're starting to mix genres a little, and you have to really decide where you want to go with it in the game. I think it can be fun, but you have to really decide ahead of time, is this going to happen a lot? Because if so, then the players are probably going to start to say, look, we need to have something to work with here. If this is going to constantly come out of left field, we want to be able to deal with it. We want to be able to use magic too, or something. Or is it going to just happen once just to mix things up, and then you'll just quote Hamlet at them? But supers, same idea. Yeah, but the thing is there, even more so than something like D&D, supers, they're superheroes. They're supposed to be able to deal with these challenges, probably beyond just stopping a bank robbery. You're talking about things like, supervillains and alien invasions and stuff like that. They're supposed to be able to cope with weird stuff like that. So how does Batman deal with the zombie apocalypse? I don't know. But, don't use zombie apocalypse. But, you get my point. How does Batman deal with Dracula? How does, Spider-Man deal with a werewolf? There probably was a comic about that at some point. I don't Wikipedia that. But, you get my point. These are things where I think the super's abilities would help them, but it's not like they're suddenly magical too. I mean, unless you're dealing with a Doctor Strange or something like that. But I think it's something where it's a genre mix that you have to make up your mind about ahead of time. But could be potentially, really fun. One brief footnote about White Wolf and Vampire the Masquerade or the Requiem or whatever it is this week. I'm not a fan. I don't dislike White Wolf, but I don't really know about White Wolf. I've deliberetely avoided talking about the whole vampire clan and all that kind of stuff because it's simply I'm not familiar with it. I understand the sort of the gist of it, where these vampires are very powerful and the PCs can potentially become extremely powerful beings and all this stuff, and that's fine, that's cool. But this is a very different thing than what we're talking about when we're talking about running a game with, the classic undead creatures being encountered by the party as monsters and or potentially hostile NPCs or whatever you want to call them. Somebody else can talk about things like White Wolf because I'm not the guy to go on about that. So, anyway, this is the end of the Undead recap or whatever you want to call it. And I hope you enjoyed watching. And if you did, hey, give me a thumbs up. That'd be great. Give me a subscribe. That'd be great too. And I will talk to you guys later next time about something else. That's all for now. Bye.